I'm an HR manager. I've been doing this for 5 years. And here are the three biggest mistakes that I see people make in interviews. Number one, okay? People show up to the interviews not dressed professionally. Like, sneakers do not count. I once had this guy show up in an interview in a full tux, but he had on those dad New Balances, like the big white ones with the blue lining on them. And I was so shocked, and I knew then that something had to have been wrong with that guy, and I was right away. You need to show up dressed professionally. Even if you have the same outfit that you wear to every single interview, nobody's gonna know. You should not be wearing jeans to an interview. You should not be wearing sneakers to an interview. You need to wear flats if you're a girl, even like loafers or something, right? You need to wear proper shoes, right? If you're a man, you need to wear proper shoes. Dress shoes are always a go-to. Men's loafers, anything that is not a sneaker. Second,
Well, I think that the dress code, dressing professionally, is important. You know, today's world, could you get by with some sneakers on? Old dad, New Balance. Probably not. That probably ain't gonna work, man. Old dad, New Balance is not gonna work. Some Fresh Forces. Man, that I don't know. That may not work either. But there are some sneakers that you can wear that fit well with a suit. So I think it's really about the suit. I think it's about he wore a tuxedo to a tuxedo to an interview. I think that's the issue. From a lady's perspective, some flats. Well, flats are fine. Flats are fine. But would I rather see some flats or some nice pumps or something? Nice clean pair of pumps or something. I think that's cool. I think that works. I think you gotta dress appropriately for the job that you're going to. We hit 2020 and people kind of lost their minds on what appropriate dress looked like. And so we're having to reteach ourselves over these last few years of what professional dress looks like in the workplace now. And so it's a struggle. It shouldn't be a struggle, but it's a struggle. So, old old dad New Balances with the thick heel. That probably ain't gonna work, man. That probably ain't gonna work. Probably not gonna work.
you need to make sure that when you are being asked a question, you answer the question directly. If someone asks you why you transitioned from your last position, which is always the one question that a lot of HR managers ask to determine whether or not you were a problem at your last job or why you're even looking for a job, and whether or not you have been in a situation where you're fired and now you're just looking for another job because you were the problem, or you simply just got laid off and you're looking for another job. We need to know why you transitioned from your last position. I usually answer that with, I am seeking a role that will allow me to grow in my career. My current role is great. I enjoyed where I'm currently working. I love it. Unfortunately, there's not enough room for growth due to the way that the organization is set up. So I am now seeking a role to grow more, and I'm looking for an opportunity to grow. And a lot of times you'll get good responses or feedback from that, but you need to make sure that you're answering the questions directly. A tip for that is to make sure that you ask yourself hypothetical questions that you could be asked in an interview, and you prepare for them. You rehearse them in a mirror. You get comfortable answering those questions. So when it's time for the interview, you're confident. Don't get me wrong, the nerves may still appear, but you're more confident in your answers. You could get a question that throws you off, but that's why it's important to prepare. Because one question may shake you, but the other common ones you'll get asked, you're already prepared for.
Yeah, I mean, prep. I agree. Prep. You can prep in the mirror. You can prep on video. You can prep with your little brother. You can prep just with audio. You can do whatever you want to do, but absolutely prep. Absolutely, you want to prep. You want to have a few questions that you've gone through, that you've answered, a few scenarios that you've already prepared, so that if they ask a question, you can kind of pivot a little bit to make sure you get that question answered. But you definitely got to prep. Now, as far as answering every question directly, I don't know again. I don't know again. I get your point. I think it's about answering the question smartly. Sometimes you can be asked a question and you can pivot just a little bit. You can turn your answer around just enough that makes the interviewer feel like you answered the question well, but you didn't give them everything, because you don't want to give them everything in this interview. You just want to give them enough that shows a little bit more about who you are, what you've done in the past. But sometimes you don't want to give them everything, because reality, I guess just for some folk, everything you did at the old job wasn't good. I mean, let's be real. Not everything you did at the old job was great. So you don't want to tell them everything. You want to tell them just enough to keep them coming, to keep them wanting more. So again, I won't focus so much on saying answer every question directly. Like I'm telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I think that you want to answer the question smartly, not just directly. All right.
Usually when I have candidates that don't know how to answer a question that I ask, I usually assume that most likely they won't be able to stay focused or critically think. Like that's just coming from me, especially when it comes to certain positions that require you to critically think on a daily basis. I have to look for those things right away. You have a short amount of time to prove yourself in an interview. The third thing that people always do during an interview that pretty much never lands them the job is not asking any questions at all. Even if it sounds so stupid, ask questions. Is this a benefited position? You could ask something like that. Does this position have benefits? What's a day-to-day like in this position? What are your expectations for this position? Why is this position open? What was the last person like in this position? It could be anything about the job. It could be about the company. What type of benefits do you have? Do you guys have 401k? Is there room for growth in the organization? Are you guys focusing on certain goals? It could.
I'm not sure those are good questions. I do agree with her. I agree that you should always have questions. Absolutely. You do yourself a disservice if you don't have questions when you go to an interview. I'm talking about every single interview. Some cases, in most cases, you go through multiple interviews, 2 interviews, 3 interviews. Let's say you got a screening and 2 additional interviews. And you may even have a final interview that's over coffee or something. And maybe I'm thinking about higher level positions and she's thinking about lower level positions. Maybe she's also thinking about it from an HR perspective and I'm thinking about it from a leadership perspective. But what I'll say is this. I will never encourage you guys to go into an interview and start asking about benefits. Yep, I said it. Never go into this interview asking about benefits. This interview is not about the benefits. Do your own research. You'll have time to talk about money and benefits packages and all of that stuff. Right now, it's just strictly about understanding the role. It's about you showing your best self, not about, is this position benefited and does it have 401k and all of that stuff. No, I leave that stuff on the table for another conversation. The other thing that I say is that you don't ask the same questions of different people. You ask questions based on the person that's sitting across the table. So if you're talking to her, an HR rep, maybe you ask some very basic questions, but you're still asking about the role, right? Because again, as an HR person, she probably has limited understanding of the role in itself. But if you're sitting across from the hiring manager, you're asking different questions, right? If you're sitting across from the hiring manager's manager, let's say the director, the VP, etc., some executive level position, maybe you're in a final interview, you ask a different type of question. Maybe it's something related to the organization as a whole and how this position feeds into the future, the direction of the organization. Maybe that's a different type question. That's a question from somebody that got a little bit more depth, that truly wants to understand the organization and how their position ties into the bigger picture. If you're talking to a partner, you want to ask a question about how these two organizations tie in together. Again, that is showing a person with depth. All right, so let's not go into it thinking that we can ask the same questions of every single interviewer. Doesn't work that way. And let's stay away from these basic benefited questions. Does the job have vacation? Do y'all have sick leave? Do y'all do PTO versus sick leave? Or do y'all have parental leave? What are we talking about? Come on, ask better questions. Stay engaged. You do that, you got a better chance of getting the job. All right, appreciate it.